us off, could you go ahead and introduce yourself with your hometown, your undergrad institution and degree, and then how you ended up at UD?
Yeah, sure. So I was born in a suburb south of Chicago, and it was actually a pretty poor community. We moved when I was 6 to Northwest Indiana, which is still a suburb of Chicago, but was a little bit more affluent. And so I do consider Crown Point, Indiana, my hometown, although I didn't move there until I was 6. And I completed my undergraduate degree in biology and science education at, well, it was called Tri-State University at the time I went there. They are a small private college. It is secular, but it's a lot like UD in the size and I would say the makeup of students that go there. We had a major donor after I graduated, and it's now called Tryon University. So if anybody's from Indiana and you've heard of Tryon University, that is actually where I went to school for my undergraduate degree. And I landed at UD after doing a postdoc at the University of Iowa, and I also was a visiting assistant professor at Beloit College, which is another small undergraduate private institution, and in Wisconsin. The year that I was applying for jobs, when I got my job at UD, I actually was quite successful in the application process, and I do have to say that I chose UD. I had 2 other offers on the table, and I think the biggest reason, there's a couple reasons, but one of the biggest reasons that I landed at UD was because I felt like when I got to campus, it was like home. And I think that was primarily because of the people that I interacted with. In fact, I interacted with Dr. Hicks on my interview, and I don't know, I just felt like I really fit in here. And I also valued the fact that UD values research and teaching, and obviously teaching is our primary goal, but that research is also very much supported and valued here. And I felt like I could really continue my career and launch my career forward by coming to UD. So that's how I ended up here. So I have to say, my dad came from a really poor neighborhood. And I remember my grandfather, he would say things like, "You don't need to get a college education. I didn't get my college education, so you don't need to either." So that's kind of the mindset that my dad also had. And my mom fought really hard to get me to college. And I remember growing up, she was really the one that said, "You're going to college because you need to have the ability to support yourself if you need to," because she had been told her whole life. She was born in 1951 and her parents were born in 1920. So she had been told basically, your life's goal is to basically find a man and get married. And she did that, and my dad was an alcoholic. So I think she felt like if I got a college education, then I might, be spared feeling like I was trapped and couldn't get out of whatever situation I was in. So she was really, really supportive, and she was really the person that propelled me forward and had me, pushed me into going to college. So my dad didn't partake at all in any of the activities, everything from going to different universities to visit them, to even being quite resistant to take out loans. So I did have to take out loans, and that was just one of those things. My dad was a blue-collar worker. My mom was a secretary, and there was just no way we were going to be able to afford it without taking out loans. So that's kind of my experience of getting to college. Once I got there, I feel like I kind of fell into place. And I think one of the things, though, was that I wasn't it wasn't super clear to me how financial aid worked. I remember sitting in the financial aid office for a long time trying to figure things out. And I remember it wasn't until my senior year that I realized I could use some of my student loan money to pay for housing off campus. I didn't know that. And so I felt like I was just going to have to stay on campus all 4 years because I didn't know that you could use some of your student loan money to pay for housing, even if it was off campus. It wasn't until my junior year that I figured that out. So I was on campus my freshman, sophomore, and junior years, which was actually quite unusual. Most of the time at my school, people had moved off definitely after their sophomore year. We were pretty actually required to stay on campus our freshman and sophomore years, but most people by their junior year had moved off campus, and I stayed on campus because I didn't realize I could use money from my student loans to pay for housing off campus. So finally by my senior year, then that's what I did. I moved in to a house with 3 other girls, and we were, it was a lot nicer of an environment, especially for a senior to be in. And they were all engineers, so we all spent a good deal of time studying. And I was doing student teaching because I actually have I double majored in biology and science education, so I did have to do student teaching. So that last semester, I was wiped. It was pretty tough. But it was a good environment to be in, and I enjoyed the time that I was able to spend with them. So I guess and then from there, I do have to say, going on to graduate school, I never thought in a million years that I would go on to get a master's, let alone a PhD. And so when I graduated with my undergrad, I was like, okay, I'm done with school. I'm going to go out into the world and do my thing, and I'm done with school. In part because I felt like I needed a break. But the other part was that I just didn't even think, it was sort of a miracle in my mind that I even got a bachelor's degree. So it was not even a twinkle in my mind for another 2 years that maybe I needed to go on for another degree. And it really was being in the classroom, realizing that although I absolutely love teaching biology, I was pretty bored, and my brain needs a lot more stimulation than that. And that kind of goes back to what I said earlier, that I'm so grateful that I can do research and teaching, because the research really does, and I've seen even more since I've been here at UD, research really does help to inform and support what you're doing in the classroom and keeps you on top of your field. And that just goes hand in hand. And so I realized this, I think, pretty much early on when I was teaching high school, that I needed to do something else. And so that's kind of what motivated me to go on to get a master's degree and a PhD. But it was definitely one of those things where, being a first generation college student, I never thought that I had the capability to get a graduate degree. I didn't even know how to do it. So it took a lot of talking and a lot of time, which is why I was 30 before I started my PhD. It took me that long to kind of figure out what I wanted to do and how to do it. So, and that is because I didn't have a mom or a dad that even had a bachelor's degree, let alone a master's or a PhD. So I had to spin my wheels for a little bit and talking to a lot of other people, trying to figure out how to do this. So. Well, honestly, I don't know if I knew who had parents that went to college or not. I don't really think that I ever felt like I was out of place. That's part of the reason why actually I chose Tri-State, was a lot of the students that go there came from families that were very similar to my own. A lot of middle class workers, a lot of my friends were from blue collar families as well. And so I don't know that I ever actually felt out of place. And that's actually part of the reason why. So I also had thought about applying to other universities. In fact, Tri-State was the only one that I ended up applying to. also had visited St. Francis University, which is a small private Catholic institution in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And then I also really loved St. Mary's at Notre Dame, which is the female, campus. It's just across the street from Notre Dame. I really loved their campus, but one of the reasons why I chose not to go there was exactly kind of what you just are talking about, which is when I was on their campus, I felt like a lot of the students that went there came from families that had way more money than me, and were probably, buried deep in the number of generations that had gone to college. And I just did not feel like, although I love St. Mary's, I would have loved to have gone there, but I just didn't feel like in the people that were there that I felt like I fit in with the caliber of people that were there. So that's why I ended up at Tri-State. It's funny because I'm now realizing there's some parallels here, that part of the reason why I ended up at UD was because when I went to campus, I felt like I fit in. I felt like I could be part of this community, and that's actually kind of how I chose my undergraduate institution. So I don't know if I can really give you any specific examples of times where I felt like I was in a situation where there was a lot of other people around me that knew what they were doing, and I had no idea what I was doing. And I'm pretty outgoing, so as most people here probably know. So I was not the type of person that was shy or afraid to actually go talk to my professors. I was definitely just one of those people that I would be in the computer lab, because back in the 90s we had computer labs because there was no such thing as laptops. And I would be making up my study guide, and I remember I would run down the hall to my professor, be like, I'm just wondering, like, what about this is going to be on the test, or this confuses me, can you go back over this with me? I was not shy at all, and I would just do that. So, I just think that for me, it was the choice in college that led to me feeling like and my personality, that mixed with my personality, just, I think, set me up in a way that didn't make me feel like I was out of place or, shouldn't be talking to my professors. So, yeah. One thing that I don't think that I have addressed that I do actually share with Dr. Dannett and Dr. Hicks is that although I did take out loans, I did not have very much money either. And I can identify a little bit with Dr. Hicks in that like I mentioned, my father was an alcoholic, was abusive. And so when I went away to college, and I was the defender, that was kind of my role in the family. I had a brother and a mom that were still at home. And without me there, I was afraid of what was going to happen. So at the same time, after I had moved away for my freshman year, I started realizing what life could be like in a more functional sense, and I liked it. And so the summer after my freshman year, I moved home for about a month and a half. And I was thrown back into this situation, and I just got to the point where I could not handle it emotionally anymore. So I had saved up, I was working at a bakery, and after a month and a half, I had saved up just enough money to be able to move back to school. But all of the money, almost everything except for $25, I had to pay for my housing for the rest of the summer. So it was $225 for the rest of the summer. This is in 1996, so it was a lot cheaper then. And I started doing a work study job on campus. What I did was I was a cheerleader, as you might imagine. And that was when I contacted my cheerleading coach, and she worked in the alumni office at the university, and she found me a work study job on campus. So I went back and to campus, and that was really hard. It was hard to leave them. At the same time, I felt like I had to, but I had to live off of that $25 for 3 weeks. And I was literally starving. There were nights where I had to go to sleep, balled up, didn't have any food. And it was a very tough thing to go through. But knowing in my heart of hearts that I was doing what I needed to do in order to survive emotionally. School saved me, really. My undergraduate institution was my home and was how I learned to grow up, how I learned to act as a functional adult in this world. And it's also the reason why, as I can tell all of the students that are here today, and I tell my students this many times that are in my classes, if you are ever in a situation where there is a food shortage or you are struggling to get food, please do let me know. I have brought in ramen noodles for my students before because it's like, I don't want you guys to have to go through what I went through. So that was a big challenge. That was a layer that was added on top of me being a first generation student, but kind of how I can identify with some of the financial hardships that Dr. Dana and Dr. Hicks had gone through. So